ready to get going? So this is our podcast. We're just thrilled to have Gordon Govens with us today.
Thank you very much.
Gordon is an executive at Stillman College and has got more educational experience than a Carter's has little liver pills. He's a PhD, he's a reverend, he's a lawyer, and he just gushes wisdom. So we always love it when we spend time around Gordon. So Gordon, why don't you tell us your thoughts and everything about the Unity Group here in Tuscaloosa? You've lived all over the country. You're from Michigan originally.
No, actually, I'm from Philadelphia, Pennsylvania.
Philadelphia. Oh my gosh, it's even worse.
Philadelphia, Pennsylvania.
Yeah, but you've been all over everywhere, and so you have a really good, fresh perspective of what Tuscaloosa is like. So why don't you just take it away?
Well, as you said, I've lived grew up and born and raised in Philadelphia. Went to school in New York City. Law school, lived in Princeton, New Jersey, lived in Seattle, Washington, lived in Holland, Michigan in the Midwest. I've lived and worked in Atlanta in Georgia. Prior to coming to Alabama, I was in Texas, South Texas. So I've lived in a variety of places.
Yes.
So my perspective on race and on our country and our culture is based on those experiences. My hermeneutic, the way I interpret things, are based on that. And now in Alabama. The experience in Alabama, which is far different than any place I've ever lived.
Wow.
And far different than any place that I've ever lived. The culture itself, and specifically as it has to do with race.
Okay.
So the Unity group that we have, I think, is a group, I think I mentioned this before in our group, it's a group that needs to be developed in every corner of the United States. And it's really simple.
Yeah.
It's a bunch of men who are getting together, talking honestly about race and communicating.
Yeah.
It's that simple. Yeah. Talking honestly about race and communicating.
Yeah.
And being honest about it.
Yeah.
It happens organically. I think the most important aspect of the group where we get our honesty is we provide a safe space for people to share their innermost views without being outwardly judged or ostracized or those views being weaponized. I think that's one of the most important things about the group. To be honest, I don't want to sound like a cynic, but I can't imagine this group, I would have never imagined this group existing in other places that I've lived.
Wow.
Because I believe that there is a greater awareness here in Alabama about the impact, the negative impacts of not getting along because of the history of Alabama.
Yeah.
It is the epicenter of the civil rights movement, and you're just reminded of it at all times.
Yeah.
So I think that that's a unique feature of the geography and the culture.
Well, last Sunday we celebrated Bloody Tuesday, which is was a horrible event, but was indicative of that time period. And I thought it was interesting that the sheriff's department was the one that inflicted the pain 60 years ago, and the sheriff stood up on the courthouse steps and sort of apologized and talked about that role back then. That was pretty unique.
Yeah, one of the narratives you often hear throughout our country is that why should I apologize for something that happened so long ago that I actually had no role in? And one of the most important features of, I think, characteristics of the Unity Group is that our discussions are all framed within a biblical framework.
Yeah.
Our core values are rooted in the biblical framework. And when you look at the issue, not just the race issue, but apologizing for something in the past within a biblical framework, you're not apologizing for something that you've actually done. You're apologizing, or you're saying you're sorry, or you're showing empathy because you have a consideration for the person in the room who's hurt.
Yeah.
And you want to heal.
Yeah.
And you don't want to do any harm. So I think that's one of the most important features of our identity as a group is to do that. And I think the sheriff giving a statement of regret which I think is more accurate, of regret, was honest and sincere.
Yeah.
It was.
Yeah.
It was honest and sincere. I agree with that. So I think the group, our unity group, is something that could be modeled around the country. Mm-hmm. And it would only take, what? How many people do we have in a group? It would probably take
We only have about 14, 15, 16
about
show
16
up.
people
Yeah.
in the group.
We got about 40 people involved.
Yeah, 40 people involved, and it would only take a core amount of people to start a group like that, and then evangelize what the group is doing. I think this is what I hope we're going to be doing, which is evangelizing the group. And the best way to testify to the impact of the group is the three of us and the members that we have in the group. As a matter of fact, the remarks for the Bloody Tuesday were all, were put together. The regret statement were put together by a member of our group, which I think is great.
Yeah, that would have never happened were it not for the group, because
No, it wouldn't.
we wouldn't have had the close relationship with Joe Eatman.
Yeah.
Okay, and Joe felt very comfortable, give me a buzz, say, "Would you mind touching base with the sheriff?" And so it was just an easy. And then of course Lloyd's a member of our group, and so it was just those relationships were already there.
Yeah.
And they would not have been there without this group.
Yeah. And the group breaks down misperceptions, stereotypes.
Yeah, yeah,
Reveals ignorances for us all, by the way. And so
Yeah.
it's very important. It's not just hey, the white members of the group are becoming, quote, woke.
Yeah.
Because they're listening to the African American members of the group. No,
Yeah.
it's we are breaking down stereotypes and ignorances because we are having honest conversations with one another.
yeah,
And to be honest with you, the perspective I bring is from an African American Christian male from the Northeast,
yeah.
who's been around and who's not a sort of a product of Alabama or the South, and that's the
Yeah.
perspective. I think that's a unique perspective that I bring to the group, more so than any education accolades that I have.
It's fun watching watching each of us grow in our learning.
Yeah.
It just been so many. I remember one time Ronnie Whitaker said something like, what is critical race theory? Mm-hmm. Well, so we went around and each person told what they thought it was, and it was like difference in daylight and
All
dark.
over the map. Yep.
I mean, it was everybody had all the white people thought one thing and all the black people thought something else, and it wasn't anywhere close. So we were able to walk through that.
Yeah,
And,
yeah. Yeah, and I think what's been impactful for me are the comments that I've heard from and I feel actually uncomfortable about to use this word right now. I feel uncomfortable because it seems to be so empty from my, quote, white brothers in the group. I mean, it just sounds wrong to even designate any of you or my other brothers as black or white. I mean, I think that's the effect that the group has had. I see
agree.
you all more as Christians, the identity of Christians more so than I see race. But what's been impactful for me is to hear my we have to come up with a different word. But my white brothers who are saying, I never knew this, or to hear you, Dan, when you've told me that you went we made a visit and you were in a community where there are no African Americans at all, no people of color at all, and it made you feel
It's
different.
uncomfortable.
It was uncomfortable. And would that have happened? Would that have happened 10 years ago?
No.
Yeah. So that is very impactful. I think I've had more. I've been affected by the, not just by the development of my white brothers and sisters, but also my African American brothers too as well.
Yeah, it's been interesting to watch. I think James has learned a lot. Yeah.
Who's our oldest?
He's our oldest member.
He is.
He's president of SELC.
Important perspective, by the way.
Yeah, and it's just been, and he's just, first of all, he's just a lovely human being, and so interested in learning, and he wants to learn.
Yes.
He'll ask questions and stuff like that, and it's. I remember one time, there was the perception that all rich people were millionaires, so that was his
Or all white
perception.
people were millionaires,
All white
yeah.
people, all white people were millionaires. He said, "How many of y'all are millionaires?" And no hands went up.
Nobody wanted to admit it anyway.
But it was funny. He said, what? And then, when Lloyd came in, probably one of the highlights of humor is when Lloyd went in and asked Kevin. He says, Kevin, I said, only want Kevin to answer this question, is why do white people bury their dead so quick?
Interesting.
And Kevin says, because he doesn't want them to turn black. And that was a great learning experience for all of us.
Now, to show you the importance of diversity, as an African American, I never heard that before in my life.
Is that right? That's
I've
funny.
never heard that.
So I guess maybe it's a Southern thing.
It must be a Southern thing, which
That's
is
funny.
I think which is the point. I mean, this is what I've learned. It is as much about geography and culture as it is about race, because there are lots of differences that I have with my African American friends who are in the group, and it's just because of geography. It's just because of geography and the difference in the culture, in the African American culture in the North versus African American culture in the South.
Yeah.
There's some big differences.
It's interesting talking about my in Virginia, in Northern Virginia. I was never around black people. I played. There was a football. There was like a black kid on some football team. In my senior year, high school had 2,000 students in it. There were 2 black kids in it, scared to death. Okay, but it wasn't until as part the military or spending time in the South that I actually were exposed to and DC, inside DC.
So contrast that with my dissertation advisor, who grew up in a white woman who was a Presbyterian missionary. Her parents are missionaries in the Democratic Republic of Congo in Africa. She was born and raised in Congo.
Wow.
She came to the United States when she was 18 years old to Arkansas.
Oh my gosh.
It was a shock for her to be around white people when she
my
got
gosh,
here.
yeah.
And as a matter of fact, and to hear some of the comments that were being made about people of color during that time. So I bring her up as an example because when we talk about diversity, I've often used her as an example to say, if I'm going to have diversity within my group, I want a Caucasian woman who grew up in the Democratic Republic of the Congo within my organization because she brings a different perspective than someone who'd be Caucasian who would grow up in California and have a different sensitivity. I want her there. As much as I want the conservative white male in my group, in my organization, because I want to know those perspectives as well. I mean, if you're fully committed to diversity, true diversity, that's beyond race and is beyond gender, then you want the diversity of the experience of the person. You want the diversity of the experience of the person, and that experience may encompass geography, skin color, and a whole host of other things.
I think to that point, one of the things that I kind of feel sorry for people that don't have the experience that we have, because apathy causes you to not be curious. But once you lose your apathy and become curious, your life gets enriched to such a degree because
I agree.
All these different experiences that everybody have are interesting, and they also make the group, the sum greater, greater than some of the parts or whatever. Anyway, that's my little comment there. But like when you came in, you brought such an entirely, it didn't matter what color you were, you brought in an entirely different batch of experiences.
Right.
Educational experience, everything else. Your beautiful wife, your kid. I mean, all those things just kind of add to the overall value, for lack of a better term, of the group, if that makes any sense at all.
No, it does, because you like gumbo?
I do. I will eat. I will eat gumbo. It's not my favorite, but I will eat
It's
it.
my favorite.
Yeah, and gumbo's not just rice.
Yeah.
Gumbo's not just the sausage. It's the roux and how you put the roux together. And you're right. You're right, Dan. It's you have to embrace the value that you get from having different perspectives.
Yeah.
In the room, it becomes. Excuse me. It becomes a buffet.
Yeah.
It becomes a buffet of different
It's in the
tastes.
sausage.
It's exactly right, and I think that's what the group do. So I've told you gentlemen before that I think that iGroup embodies what diversity, equity, and inclusion, the principles of diversity, equity, and inclusion were intended to be. Now, we're an all-male group, so there's that aspect of, quote, diversity that we don't have. And I think that was intentional for strategic reasons.
I think that's a good idea. Too. For people going forward and wanting to start their own group, because it eliminates one cause of miscommunication.
I agree.
And that's between men and women.
Yeah. I agree. However, we have, the group has been intentional about being diverse in other ways.
Yes.
And I think sometimes we focus too much on the D in DEI, and we don't focus enough. Corporations and schools don't focus enough on equity and inclusion. Inclusion. We're an inclusive group, meaning we are interested. Maybe we can be more inclusive than we usually are because we have people like me who talk too much in the group. But we are inclusive because we want to hear everyone's opinion. We value everyone's opinion and everyone's perspective. And there's an equity in the group because there's no stratospheres.
Right.
Equity and inclusion also connotate action. And I'm writing a book about spiritual leadership in a secular world, and I'm comparing the United Methodist Church with Church of the Highlands. Which is probably going to get me in trouble with some of my Methodist friends, but the cultures are radically different. In the Church of the Highlands, it is a hands-on, people are involved. I mean, people get touched, and there's a deliberate effort to include you in the ministry, whereas in the Methodist Church, that happens by happenstance. And there's no common way for it to happen. It happens some places, it doesn't happen other places. And it makes a difference in the culture.
Well, I have a question for you about the diversity of Church of the Highlands.
Okay.
And when we're talking about diversity, I'm saying there are older folks, there are younger folks, there are African American, there are Latinos, there are affluent. You see everything. You really do see a cross section of the culture that's down here, the community that's down here. Question for you both: was that something that was intentional, or did it just happen organically because of the core values and the mission of the church itself?
The latter. It happened in the work. It was very organic.
And I think that's important.
That church is all about leading people to Jesus, and that just attracts.
It was interesting. I had a friend, and I never had noticed it. I brought a friend that used to go to my church in Maryland down, Reed Rimender, really good guy, and I brought him to church, and he noticed, he says, there are no crosses.
I noticed that too.
And I said, And so if you take a look at the building, there's nothing in the building when you walk in that's going to make you feel like you don't belong there.
Sure.
We don't call things pews, and we don't have a different language. And I think, well, that's important, because I get a guy that comes out of prison, or he comes out of jail, or just comes out of somewhere where they've never been churched, and they can walk in there, and what gets your attention is people paying attention to you.
Now, the inclusive part is intentional then.
Yes.
The diversity is organic.
Yeah.
The inclusive-ness is intentional.
Very intentional. And I'm sure that if we were not, if we didn't look diverse, I'm sure someone would get concerned, and maybe do something about it. But it happened. Just happened. And we have some campuses that are predominantly black, but it's also diverse. There's white folks that go to that campus
based
too.
on the geography.
It's really, what am I close to?
Sure.
Yeah. And so.
And the equity. Let's talk about what about the equity piece of it? Because again, we never deconstruct the DEI. We never can deconstruct. They're three separate things.
Yeah.
We usually just put DEI together, and it's been it's gotten a pejorative meaning.
Yeah.
When it's not what it's intended to be.
So
what about the equety aspects?
There are things to do. I've been in. Let's just say someone wants to become a minister. In Highlands. Well, they go through, the first thing they do is they go through the growth track, which they try and encourage everybody to do.
And anyone can do that.
Anyone can do that. So, if you want to become an ordained minister at Church of the Highlands, your first step is to go through the growth track, which everybody else does. Okay, then you're assigned to a dream team or a ministry team okay, and you're given a broad base of all the different things we do, and you can pick whatever you want to pick. Okay, so now you're on a team. It might be a parking team, it might be a prayer team, it might be a group that goes into the prison, a variety of different types of things, and you serve you serve your ministry there, and you're with all different types of people. And if you were wanting to become a pastor, then someone is actually observing you and working with you and asking you questions. Then your next step would be 2 years at Highlands College.
I think to John's point too, real quick, there's nothing more equitable than rolling up your sleeves and serving somebody else together.
That's a great
So if you get a whole group, they all look different, and they've taken a step below who they're serving and serving them. And I mean that, I don't care what you look like. If you're rolling up your sleeves and getting dirty, building an on-ramp or whatever,
And none of that has anything to do with race, correct?
No.
It has nothing to do with gender, correct?
No.
Yeah. And the other question I have you've given me the example of Church of Highlands. What about the Christian church as a whole across its history? Has it been diverse, equitable, inclusive across the
Not
Christian
so
church?
much. No.
Too political. And I think it's telling that Martin Luther King's letter from Birmingham jail wasn't to the Ku Klux Klan. It was to white pastors.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, and that's still a problem today. And one of the things that we've learned in our unity group is that of all the different races, the white race is the least concerned about race. Every other race has it on their pecking order. If you were to ask Dan and I, somebody asked Dan and I, tell me about yourself, we may never mention the fact we're white.
Probably wouldn't. No.
Okay, and if we did, it'd be so far down on the pecking order. If you ask almost any other race, and among the top 5, they're going to say, well, I'm an Asian, or I'm this or I'm that. And that's so it's
Have you ever thought about why that is? You all talked about that before I came to the group. Did you come to a conclusion about why that is the case?
Because we don't, it doesn't affect us.
And
We don't perceive it.
For us, yeah.
For us.
It's not highlighted.
Yeah,
It's not in a negative
I'm not
way, correct?
being followed by a police officer because I'm white. If I'm being followed by a police officer, I'm doing something stupid. Okay.
Right.
Now it's getting a little bit. If you go in and you do a job interview and the interviewer is black and you don't get the job, then you automatically go there.
Sure.
But I've never had to experience that. Okay, and so we never experienced anything like that. So therefore, it's not on our radar.
Did you hear about the Boston Celtics coach? The questions that the Boston Celtics coach was asked at the press conferences.
No.
A reporter asked the Boston Celtics coach, and I'm intentionally not telling you what his ethnicity is.
Yeah, he's a black guy.
Well, based on whose conclusion?
Yeah. Okay.
He identifies as a Christian.
Yeah, that's right.
So if we were to say that to him, you're that, he would go, I identify as a Christian.
Yeah.
He said, my identity and my purpose is as a Christian.
Yes.
So when they asked him the question of, can you comment on the fact that there are 2 African American coaches in the finals?
Yeah.
He paused and he said, well, what about the fact that there are 2 Christian coaches?
Good for him.
Yeah.
And
That wonderful answer. Yeah.
and that's how he identifies. And so someone sent something to me, said that he's half black, half Italian.
Yeah.
But that's not how he would identify himself.
No.
If you told him that, he would say, no, I identify myself as a Christian first.
Yeah. And I remember Joe, listening to Joe talk. He said whenever, because Joe was one heck of a basketball coach.
So I hear.
He won all these championships, and he said, they don't say, the great basketball coach at Sheldon State. They said the black basketball coach at Sheldon State. He says, so always reminded me that I'm black,
Hey, we're all guilty of it.
Yeah, we are.
We'll be talking
Yeah.
about a friend. Well, this is my black. What does it matter? And I think that's something that's been planted in our minds. It wasn't there before, frankly. So
Well, it goes back, the whole designation of race and color.
Yeah.
It goes way back to Francois Bernier, who came up with these categorizations. This is in the 18th century. who comes up with these categorizations of race. He created a whole book.
Yeah.
I'll send you guys a link. An whole article where he breaks up the races that had never been done before.
Yeah.
And that then transfers into the Americas with slavery. And now we have these distinctions in America.
I'm gonna tell you.
What it is race.
I'm gonna tell you a neat story. We sponsored midshipmen within the Annapolis area, and we've stayed in touch with a bunch of them. And one of them, Drew Fitzpatrick, who lives up in North Carolina now. They had 3 natural kids, but they went over to Ethiopia and they adopted 2 girls that were daughters. I mean, sisters.
Yeah.
And so the youngest one, and this was just a couple of years ago, several years ago, she comes walking over and she's yanking on her mother's skirt and she says, "Mom," she says, "I understand that somebody around here is adopted." She says, "Who is it?"
That's very good.
How cool is that?
That's very good.
She didn't understand who was adopted.
That's very good. And we would hope that would happen in most instances.
Yeah.
When I went to Swarthmore College, I was a kid from North Philadelphia, poor inner city North Philadelphia, and I went to this elitist college.
Yeah.
And in my second year, my roommate was David Morningstar. Tall, 6'3", 6'4", blonde hair, blue eyes, from Emmitsburg, Maryland.
Oh.
And what struck me,
Yeah, I don't even know what that is. Yeah.
and Mount St. Mary's College is there. Good basketball program. And what struck me about him was when I roomed with him, he was the first Caucasian person I had ever been around who I never got a sense that they looked at me because of my color.
Oh.
And remember, I'm 18 years old, 19 years old. And we were roommates, and it was just as natural for him to be around. He listened to the music I listened to. I listened to his music.
Yeah.
And then when I found out, eventually, and I didn't realize this until years later, his father was the doctor in the town. Dr. Morningstar. It's a small town.
Yeah.
And he was the doctor for the basketball team and the sports teams.
Yeah.
So he constantly had African American basketball players and other athletes to the house. Sure. So he grew up, he said, I grew up not even seeing the distinction between the colors.
Yeah.
He said, nor did my father.
Yeah.
So when he came to college at 18 years old, there used to be, woke used to mean that you're just aware that we're all the same and that there's a problem with race. It didn't mean what it means now. So he came with an incredible amount of comfort, and more so than any other student that was at that school, Caucasian student within that school, because of his experiences.
Yeah. Well, Dan, we're going to have more content here we can shake a stick at.
Yeah, we'll have to have you back.
We'll try to wrap her up.
Yeah, so Gordon, we really appreciate it. I'm thankful to have you as a brother and a friend.
I'm thankful to have you as a brother and
you,
friend. Well, thank you, John. Always a pleasure.
So, folks, if you like this content, and how could you not?
Yeah.
Please just click that like and subscribe button down there. We're trying to grow our base and share the news with somebody, and keep checking back. We'll keep these videos coming. And we thank you for your time. We thank Gordon for his time, and we'll look forward to the next time we get together. Have a great day.
You two guys are great hosts.
Thank you.
Johnny Carson and Dick Cavett.
It's gonna be